of the 8,500 studies looking at those three areas of energy, water, recycling and waste, you can see that only 132 of those studies actually look at the issue of attitude change and behaviour. So we're looking at a very, very small number of studies looking at this whole issue from a human angle. And that's quite a dramatic finding, isn't it? Now this conference is trying to import a new breath, a new approach to sustainable energy. And I'd like to suggest that this is a very important gap, that together we can bring a new understanding of the importance of looking at human behaviour in relation to this whole issue of creating a more sustainable future for ourselves. And incidentally, the study that Professor Ieelpa conducted was complemented by a number of interviews which reinforced the conclusion presented here, that there is an enormous gap in terms of addressing the human issues behind achieving change. So the conclusions from the study that I've just presented to you show that there is a gap of significant proportions, both in terms of research and practice, when it comes to reducing the environmental impact of people at work. Why is there this gap? Well, I'd like to suggest that it's because organisational scholars have tended to focus on strategic level corporate change. And what they tend to have ignored, as you can see from the last point on this slide, is an understanding of the individual level from which, of course, we all know change starts. And I'm talking about the individual level from which change starts. And of course there are many, many variables that we could use to study the individual. And I was asked if I could look at the very particular case of gender as one variable. So I'm just going to present you a few slides relating to gender and how this might impact on organisational change in the area of sustainable futures. Gender. Why gender? Why would we look at gender? Well, it's potentially a very important variable. We have in our audience today a mixture of men and women. And in terms of green issues, a Canadian survey conducted fairly recently in 2002 by practitioner and academics at the University of Waterloo in Canada showed that men and women were equally interested in green energy. And as consumers of domestic energy, they are both equally important as consumers. And some people are more than aware of the key role that women have to play in trying to help create the sustainable future that we're all driving towards. The Centre for American Progress Action Fund, for example, is a case in point. They have a Women Going Green in Atlanta initiative, which is currently educating women in both management and entrepreneurial opportunities, which can be grasped in the whole area of green energy economics. Why? Because there is a recognition that women constitute, as we know, at least 50% of the workforce in the US and many other parts of the world. And not only do they constitute 50% of the workforce, but in America currently they have higher levels of college enrollment than is the case with men. And so if we're looking to grow a sustainable future within organizations, we cannot ignore the part that women could play in that whole drive. And I think what I'm saying of America is also very true of Latvia, because in the research I've conducted in Latvia and on Latvian society, one point that came across very clearly was the fact that women have significantly higher rates of enrollment in college here in Latvia than men. I think it stood at the level of about 65%. So if we want to create a green, sustainable future, we cannot ignore the part that women could play in that future. Another initiative in America, which is worthy of note, the Business and Professional Women's Foundation. That is attempting to address the underrepresentation of women in green industries. How do they do this? By providing women with suitable job training. Training and education in green-related issues is of paramount importance. And Walmart has been one of the first big organizations, you know, the big supermarket chain, to recognize the importance of this initiative, which they are currently sponsoring in America. And indeed, we have every reason to be optimistic about the possible success of these initiatives. Women are developing non-traditional work roles in the energy sector due to a rising number of female-headed households globally. And there is starting to be a critical mass of women in energy ministries, research institutes, and field projects. But I think the operative word here is starting. We are really at the beginning of this race, and only at the beginning of this race. We have a long way to go yet. Now I'm just trying to move, yes. We have a long way to go yet, and I wouldn't be painting a fair picture if I didn't tell you that there are also significant gaps. In fact, very big gaps, according to this report in 2000 on the role of women in sustainable energy development. The author of the report, Elizabeth Jaczewski, paints a rather grim picture, I have to say, in terms of women's participation. What she says is that the socio-economic perspective has been ignored in energy planning and policy. That is, until fairly recently. And in most energy institutions, the participation of women is still relatively small, and professional women face many obstacles in the male-dominated energy sector. So, this information gives you a glimpse into just one variable affecting individuals in organizations. Women, 50% of the population, are still, it seems, underrepresented in organizations in this all-important drive towards a more sustainable green future. And so, I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you would agree that if we want to create this new sustainable future, we have to address the individual issues. And in order to do that, we need to adopt a socio-technical standpoint and not simply a technical standpoint. Because we believe that corporate sustainability requires sustained pro-green technology behavior from employees. Without that behavior, we won't get the future that we're looking to create. So although part of the solution lies in technological innovation, one of the main drivers is going to be a transformation in human behavior. So I'm going to show you a model here. Of course, we must consider technology a key factor right in the center of the model that I've put there on the slide. But I cannot overemphasize the importance of addressing individual factors here on the right-hand side, as well as institutional barriers to change and societal barriers to change. And unfortunately, we've already seen there are a limited number of studies addressing this all-important issue of human behaviour. And even where there have been